Welcome to meeting number 51 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083G, the committee is meeting today to continue its study on Report 6, Arctic Water Surveillance of the 2022 Reports 5 to 8 of the Auditor General of Canada to the Parliament of Canada. The chair has asked that we move other business to another time. Do we have unanimous consent to use the full meeting for this study? Very well. I would now like to welcome our witnesses. Office of the Auditor General, Andrew Hayes, Deputy Auditor General, Nicholas Swales, Principal, Deputy of Transport, Arun Vangaraj, Deputy Minister, apologies. Lisa Stalaki, again, apologies. Associate Assistant Deputy Minister, Safety and Security, Department of National Defense, Bill Matthews, Deputy Minister, Nancy Tremblay, Associate Assistant Deputy Minister, Material, Rob Chambers, Assistant Deputy Minister, Infrastructure and Environment, and Rear Admiral Stephen Waddell, Deputy Commander, Royal Canadian Navy. Department of the Environment, Chris Forbes, Deputy Minister, Ken MacDonald, Executive Director, National Programs and Business Development, Prediction Services Directorate, Meteorological Service of Canada. That's a full house. Thank you. Mr. Hayes, you already have made your opening remarks at the last meeting. We will then go to Deputy Minister Vangaraj for 5 minutes. So go ahead, please. You have the floor.
For inviting us to be here with you this morning. As a new Deputy Minister of Transport, Marine Safety and Security of Canada's Arctic waters is among my top priorities. The Government of Canada agrees with the findings and recommendation in the Auditor General's report related to the surveillance of the Arctic waters and will take steps to address them. La connaissance de domaine.
Canada's maritime domain awareness in the Arctic is critical to ensuring the country can mitigate risks and respond to incidents that may impact our security, safety, environment, and economy. Transport Canada is working with our partners, including Inuit and Indigenous communities, Arctic residents, and industry, to address long-standing gaps in Arctic maritime domain awareness, particularly the continuous tracking of vessels, identification of non-emitting vessels, and the improvement of information sharing to ensure our Arctic waters are safe and secure.
The Prime Minister announced an additional $2 billion investment into Canada's Oceans Protection Plan, bringing the total investment to $3.5 billion. Under this plan, Canada is working together with Indigenous peoples, stakeholders, coastal communities, provinces and territories, the Government of Canada working with them to strengthen protections for our coasts and wildlife, improving maritime traffic and incident management, and advancing partnerships with Indigenous communities. With respect to the specific points raised by the Auditor General, Transport Canada leads the Interdepartmental Marine Security Working Group, which has updated Canada's maritime security framework, and this will be finalized before the end of this month. This will enable a coordinated approach to address a range of maritime security challenges and priorities, including strategies dealing with both maritime domain awareness and Arctic maritime security. Transport Canada is also reviewing legislation and regulations to address potential gaps and ensure that the Marine Transportation Security Framework continues to address modern threats and risks to the marine transportation system. As part of the Marine Security Operations Center, the third-party review, which was launched in December 22, we are working with our partners to incorporate measures to identify gaps in monitoring, assessing and reporting on maritime domain awareness, and the way forward on operational flexibility, options, and tools. Ces centres sont un exemple.
These centres are a unique example of multi-agency integration and collaboration to support that awareness and Canada's federal presence in the Arctic. The Government of Canada will continue to work with its partners to provide the equipment, infrastructure, assets, and capabilities necessary to support our maritime security interests. in the region. We are improving key equipment used for maritime surveillance by pursuing options for acquiring equipment in a timelier manner and developing contingency plans to address the risk posed by critical equipment failure.
Transport Canada's air asset capacity. The department currently dedicates the Dash 7 maritime patrol aircraft to perform surveillance in the Arctic during the shipping season. Sensors on this aircraft enable the detection, classification, and tracking of vessels of interest and marine oil spills. The Vancouver-based Dash 8 is also used as required to conduct surveillance in the Western Arctic. To improve the aircraft's state of readiness, Transport Canada has acquired a substantial inventory of Dash 7 parts to reduce the time the aircraft may be out of service. The department, in cooperation with the Canadian Coast Guard, is also conducting a review of its Aircraft Services Directorate to determine where efficiencies can be made, including recommendations for the future replacement of the Dash 7 aircraft. Le ministre a également fait l'acquisition.
The department has also procured a remotely piloted aircraft system, delivery of which is expected this summer, to augment its surveillance capacity in the Arctic. And it is also progressing with the construction of a Transport Canada hangar in Iqaluit, which will support the whole of government. This facility will support aircraft maintenance and allow for the possibility of extending Arctic surveillance operations into spring, late fall, and winter. Canada's Arctic waters surveillance is critical to ensuring the country can mitigate risks and respond to incidents that may impact our security, safety, environment, and economy.
To working with our partners on these next steps. If the committee has any questions, I would be more than pleased to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Minister Thangaraj. We now move on to Deputy Minister Bill Matthews for 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, et bon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to all committee members. As you already mentioned, I am here with some of my counterparts.
Brief opening remarks just to leave time, maximum time for question. Auditor General's report clearly identifies where departments need to collaborate more effectively on Arctic water surveillance, and National Defence welcomes those observations and agrees. Defence is directly implicated in both recommendations number 1 and 2 of the Auditor General's report. The department fully agrees with both recommendations and has developed corresponding management action plans for both, but I will stress that some of this work is complicated and multi-year in nature. If we wish to get into some of the details of those action plans, I would be happy to do so with the help of my colleagues as appropriate. Je vais m'arrêter là pour...
I'm going to conclude now in order to leave sufficient time to answer your questions, but it gives me great pleasure to be here today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And we now move on to Deputy Minister Chris Forbes. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and happy to be here today with the committee to discuss Report Audit 6 of the Auditor General. This focuses on water surveillance in the Arctic, obviously, and we are one of the 5 organizations identified in the scope of the audit. We are not directly involved in traffic monitoring, Madam Chair, but obviously we play an active operational role in supporting transportation in the Arctic. We have offices and staff in all 3 territorial capitals, and we provide support in smaller and more remote communities such as Fort Smith, Resolute Bay, and Inuvik. And we deliver programs and initiatives across the North. Probably most notably, areas such as weather prediction, nature conservation and protection and biodiversity, and climate change and adaptation. Our work also, I think, focuses a lot on reconciliation, a significant priority for the department, as well as research monitoring and international Arctic cooperation. As an example, the Meteorological Service of Canada monitors weather and ice conditions, uses world-leading computer models to predict the evolution of these conditions, and provides services that support Canadians and Canada's sovereignty in the Arctic. Les données qu'on recueille par nos réseaux sont la...
Data from these networks underpin the accurate and timely weather forecasts and warnings available to Canadians. This includes daily marine weather forecasts for the navigable waters of Canadian territory, as well as marine weather and ice information for a broad area of international waters north of 60. The data also feeds into specialized weather forecasts and information that are provided to the Canadian Armed Forces on an ongoing basis domestically and internationally, and include mission support for the Arctic offshore patrol ships when they are in the Arctic. Madam Chair, I'd also like to speak to you about the Meteorological Service of Canada's Canadian Ice Service. This service has specialized expertise in monitoring sea ice and icebergs, ice detection, and modeling. It also provides operational support for maritime activities 7 days a week to help ensure safe ice operations. This includes direct support to Canadian Coast Guard and Royal Canadian Navy operations. With longer and more widespread ice-free conditions in the ocean and sea ice decline in some areas as high as 20% per decade, it's a critical service. In addition, the department's expertise in the north also supports our work to sustain Canada's northern water resources and freshwater ecosystems. And so, Madam Chair, I'm going to stop here. And like my colleagues, I would be happy to take questions from members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your remarks. I'm very much looking forward to hearing the questions and answers today on such an important topic. For our first round of 6 minutes, we begin with Mr. Zimmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to our witnesses, especially to the Auditor General's report. Very good work done from your department. So, but I'll begin with a quote from Nunatsiaq News, August 5th of 2015. Russia is seeking to expand its Arctic territory by 1.2 million square kilometers in the resource-rich Arctic waters around the North Pole. That's the gist of Russia's new submission to the United Nations for the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which claims the seabed and its subsoil in the Central Arctic Ocean, which is natural prolongation of the Russian land territory. And yeah, that's 8 years ago now, but from just a month ago from Mr. Putin, a Reuters article, Moscow, January 27th, 2023. President Vladimir Putin held talks on Friday with top security officials about the status of Russia's efforts to legally expand its outer boundaries of its continental shelf in the Arctic Ocean. Russia in 2021 filed a submission to the United Nations seeking to redefine its continental shelf, which is to be believed to contain vast untapped resources of oil and gas. Moscow said at the time it wanted much more Arctic seabed, a move that has implications for Canada and Denmark, who have their own claims. So Putin, a very real and present threat to our Canadian Arctic security and sovereignty. I asked the Minister Anand specifically about Arctic sovereignty in May 3rd of 2022. My question to her was, Mr. Speaker, the NDP Liberal budget proves once again that the current government is all talk and no action. Instead of a plan to protect our Arctic sovereignty and security, all we got was a re-announcement of NORAD's existing infrastructure and that the government is considering its options. And we heard that again today. Our Arctic sovereignty and security cannot be protected by more liberal empty promises. Will the minister who continues to fail to defend our North stand up and explain her answer? Mr. Speaker, Canada's sovereignty in the Arctic is secure. And her answer goes on, but still, that's her premise. But from the Auditor General's report, we're clearly not anywhere near having a secure Arctic. And I'll go to the recommendations in the report, 612 of page 7. Overall, the federal government has not taken the required action to address long-standing gaps affecting its surveillance of Canada's Arctic waters. As a result, the federal organizations that are responsible for safety and security in the Arctic region do not have full awareness of maritime activities in Arctic waters and are not ready to respond to increased surveillance requirements. I'll go on to 613, the section below. The long-standing issues include incomplete surveillance insufficient data about vessel traffic in Canada's Arctic waters, poor means of sharing information on maritime traffic, and outdated equipment. The renewal of vessels, aircraft, satellites, and infrastructure that support monitoring maritime traffic and responding to safety and security incidents has fallen behind to the point where some will likely cease to operate before they can be replaced. For example, the Canadian Coast Guard and Transport Canada risk losing presence in Arctic waters as their aging icebreakers and patrol aircraft near the end of their service lives and are likely to be retired before a new fleet can be launched. We are hardly in a good place in the Arctic, despite what the minister wants to reassure us that we're good, right? I'll ask the DMs from Defense, Transport, and Environment to please respond.
Sure. I'll start. Gaps, and there's been actions taken within the department to address those gaps. Firstly, with respect to situational awareness and the information sharing, as well as on the aircraft, as you stated. So first, with respect to some of the gaps, one of the first actions that the department is doing is reviewing the working group. There are changes to the working group and how it operates to make it more nimble and responsive, and to identify where those gaps are. As the audit noted, there were the framework was old and outdated, and so that working group has met, and that action plan, or sorry, the revised framework will be approved by the end of this month.
With respect, Deputy Minister, that sounds like a lot of talk and no action. Exactly what I accused the minister of. Can we move on to Mr. Matthews? I know my time is limited.
Certainly, Madam Chair. A couple of points. One, I would distinguish between issues around lack of awareness, which is what the Auditor General's report highlights, versus ongoing legal claims made by Russia in terms of land ownership and mineral rights, et cetera. In terms of closing gaps around awareness, the work that we are advancing is twofold. Number one, we are looking Arctic offshore patrol ships, new capability, and there's 3 more coming there. But also information sharing is critical. The OAG report does flag that some vessels self-report, others, smaller vessels, are under no obligation to do so. And it is multiple departments, including Coast Guard, who's not here today, who work together to actually build that picture. And so my colleague just flagged the information sharing. It's that information sharing around those smaller vessels that's critical.
Just let me, and I appreciate some of the efforts that are being done. I've seen the AOPS, and some of the ships have been actually up there to see some of the icebreakers in action. And I applaud our Coast Guard and their efforts that are up there. They're working hard for us. But frankly, it doesn't say how are we going to fill these gaps that are clearly laid out in the Auditor General's report. You haven't answered that. You've talked about what's already being done, but haven't addressed the gaps. So let's move to the other Deputy Minister.
I'm sorry, we'll have to save your questions for the next round.
Okay, thank you.
And we now move on to Ms. Bradford for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to all the witnesses today. We certainly have a full house. It's great to see everybody here in person, and thank you for being here for this important meeting. I'm going to start with the Auditor General's report. So recommendation 6.36 states that National Defence, Transport Canada, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and the Canadian Coast Guard working together should take concrete actions to address long-standing gaps in the Arctic maritime domain awareness. So I was wondering if you could please elaborate, what are some of the barriers to information sharing, and do they stem from lack of data, research, or sound policy analysis?
Thank you. One of the areas where we identified challenges in information sharing was with the working group. While there are various departments on that working group, we identified governance and information sharing realities that can be improved. I think it might be open for the Deputy Minister to speak to what they are doing to fill some of those gaps. These have been identified through reviews over the course of a number of years.
So I can respond to that. Thank you. So part of it is governance, as just been indicated, and having, clearer lines of communication and and protocols. Part of it is data. You've already alluded to that, and making sure that we are collecting the data and that it is going into systems that people can access. And then in some cases, there are legislative impediments for us being able to share information between each other, and we are working to remove some of those barriers. But I would say that there is a very close collaborative relationship that exists. It exists domestically as well as internationally. I just left this morning a meeting with our Five Eyes partners where we are, in fact, tackling some of these questions and trying to get better at managing the data, sharing it, and using it to be more responsive and nimble and agile to deal with situations that may emerge.
Thank you. So staying with the Department of Transport, I understand that Transport Canada is in the process of procuring a remotely piloted aircraft system, which is scheduled for delivery in early 2023. Can you provide an update on this, and how will the RPAS augment Transport Canada's surveillance capacity in the Arctic?
Concluding the process of procuring that, we should take delivery later this year. There is, once we have procurement, there is work that we need to do to equip it with the sensors that we currently have on the Dash 7 aircraft. What the RPAS will do will provide a complement to aerial surveillance. There's less restrictions in terms of the number of hours that an RPAS can fly compared to a manned aircraft. And with the cameras, we'll have the same level of fidelity of information and again, just be able to augment the coverage that we have with our existing aircraft.
Okay, so continuing along the line with the Dash 7 aircraft, what work is being undertaken to ensure that they're well maintained and operational?
So the department has its own aircraft services, and as part of the operation of those aircraft services, we have a fleet of Dash 7s as well as Dash 8s. What we've done is procured a level of inventory of spare parts to ensure that those Dash 7s remain in service, extend the useful life, and minimize downtime over the next few years until a replacement can be chosen.
Is it getting harder to access replacement parts for the Dash 7?
It is getting harder, but over the fall and winter, we have executed a procurement process for that, and our indications are that we will have the required inventory to maintain those planes.
Now, turning to the construction of the hangar and the accommodations facility in Aquila, can you provide an update on the progress? What's the significance of the infrastructure, and will it be used exclusively by Transport Canada or by other departments as well?
So we finalized design of the hangar and accommodations. It is going to procurement later this month, before the end of this current fiscal year, with hopefully construction by late summer or spring, given the construction season there. It will do a couple of things for us. It will allow us, having a hangar there will allow us to use our aircraft as well as the RPAS for extended periods of time. It will also be available to our partners in the north for their use as well.
And when do you anticipate it'll be completed and up and running?
We are hoping by fiscal year 24-25.
Okay. How much time do I have left? 30 seconds. I don't know if I've got a quick question. So looking at the Auditor General's report, recommendation 6.66 requires further direction from central agencies, or does it require further leadership from department heads? For example, should the Privy Council Office and Treasury Board Secretariat of Canada develop a specialized reporting system to capture the project progress on critical aspects pertaining to Arctic surveillance in order to minimize the potential gaps that were identified in this audit? Who would like to quickly take a crack at that? Do you think that's a suggestion that can be implemented or would be useful?
That we'll have to save that for another time. So onwards to Ms. Vignola for 6 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My first question is for Mr. Hayes, and thank you all for coming today. Mr. Hayes, at the last meeting, it was pointing out that there is very little room for maneuver for renewing vessels before their useful life is over, before their service life comes to an end. And the situation seems to have worsened, actually. The expected outcomes aren't happening. So I'd like to know, in a few words, what are your concerns about the possibility that the service life will end too soon and what the implications will be for Canada's security? Thank you very much for the question. My concerns have to do with the overall situation regarding surveillance in Arctic waters. If we do not have the equipment that is necessary to undertake that surveillance, there will be deficiencies, and those will have implications for the safety and security of our Arctic. Could you give a few examples of some very concrete gaps? Well, in our report, we stated that there are vessels and satellites that are absolutely necessary. And I would also point out that there are information requirements for departments and the Coastal Guard, and there are deficiencies there that we have outlined in our report. My next question is for you as well as for Mr. Matthews. And I want to talk about icebreakers. It's very important to have icebreakers because the Arctic is still an area, despite any ice melt, there is still a lot of ice coverage. Many people have dreamed about being able to get through the Northwest Passage on a vessel, but we still need icebreakers. And there is a third partner that has still not been included in our national shipbuilding strategy. They're simply awaiting for the signature of a framework agreement. So what will that delay have on construction and then, of course, the protection of our Arctic waters? Well, I can start out. We are confident that there are ongoing negotiations, and perhaps Mr. Matthews could expand when he answers your question. What we do know is that even after negotiations have wrapped up, it takes time to build these vessels. And that's a very important factor to look at when we're talking about the future. Well, then the sooner that framework agreement or umbrella agreement is signed, then the better, because a delay in that causes further delay. This was announced already in 2019, and here we are in 2023, 4 years later. And each and every time there are further delays, and there's no movement when it comes to our icebreakers, especially our Arctic icebreakers. So, Mr. Matthews, when will it be signed? Will it be signed soon? We need to protect our Arctic waters. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the question. And as Deputy Minister, or rather Assistant Deputy Minister, I can't necessarily tell you, Deputy Minister, rather, I can't necessarily tell you exactly when, as my colleague already mentioned. PSAC is responsible, rather not PSAC, PSPC rather is responsible for this process. I am going to continue with you, Mr. Matthews. What about our submarines? Are there any that are able to patrol Arctic waters, and how old are our submarines? And what kind of maintenance is required for any surveillance activities on the part of submarines? Madam Chair, I'll start, but then I'll give the floor to my counterpart. A lot of maintenance is required, whether it's older submarines or new submarines. That's just the nature of the asset. And as I said, our assets are quite old, but perhaps my colleague has something to add. Thank you very much for the question, Madam Chair. The reality is this. These are complex operations, difficult operations. And operations in the Arctic require significant support and maintenance when it comes to submarines. We know that it is complex to maintain and support our fleets, whether it has to do with Arctic, Pacific, or Atlantic operations. Thank you very much.
And now we move on to Mr. Desjardins for 6 minutes on the screen.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The report clearly found inadequate patrol equipment was not the only major problem in terms of marine surveillance, but it also pointed to a massive infrastructure gap that is affecting the aerial patrol needs. Those gaps are centered on Nunavut's airports. As the report states, and I quote, "The lack of adequate infrastructure is also a problem for the National Aerial Surveillance Program." From July to November, Transport Canada's Dash 7 Maritime Patrol airplane is located during that period of time in Iqaluit, but the department does not have the infrastructure needed to maintain its aircraft or house its personnel in the Arctic. So you heard aspects of that in the transport representative's comments, but absent of the fact that the airport itself, the actual physical airport, is in need of critical infrastructure repair and maintenance. As anyone who knows the realities of the Arctic North, they can tell you that the issues with the airport's infrastructure aren't just limited to those under the aerial surveillance program, but airports in their entirety there aren't being properly invested in operations and maintenance, etc. Actually, my colleague, Laurie Idleout, who represents Nunavut, is the member of parliament for that area. I had an opportunity to connect with her and some of the things that the people there are experiencing, the direct constituents of Nunavut, and they're deeply concerned about the horrific state of their infrastructure. She told me that there was mold even in the airport's terminal and in the community of Whale Cove and Cambridge Bay in particular still don't even have paved airstrips. They're still landing on gravel when it's absent of ice and snow. It's unthinkable that these kinds of structural and health issues in airport terminals would remain unaddressed in airport terminals in southern Canada. It just wouldn't be a reality for us in the south. But it's even worse because Whale Cove has several boil water advisories, but they are being forced to choose between a new terminal to think about some of the water problems and the infrastructure problems that are present there, including sewage. So it's a very difficult decision that they have to make, of course. So my question is to Transport Canada officials: should Whale Cove and other Inuit communities be put in a position where they have to choose between getting mold out of their airport terminal and having the infrastructure needed for clean water?
Past few years, the department has focused on airport infrastructure, including northern airports and facilities, rehabilitation of runways. Again, acknowledging that the link to many of these communities, air is the only link to that, and so substantial investments have been made in rehabilitating infrastructure, and obviously more is to be done, and there are plans to look at where those investments can be made, not only in runways, but also
But is it acceptable to have mold in an airport terminal? That's the question.
No, it's not acceptable.
So why is it still there?
Working with communities as part of a capital replacement plan and addressing those things often takes time. It is not a lack of will.
Decades and decades.
It is not a lack of will. It's
on.
just it is not a lack of will to address those things. It's just a matter of our capacity to get at each one of those infrastructure requirements.
Interesting, capacity. And so have you brought this capacity issue up forward to the minister?
As part of our programming and our overall investment strategy in our airports, as well, that has been addressed with the minister and through programs such as the Critical Infrastructure Program and the capital.
So you've spoken to the minister directly in relation to how unacceptable it is to have airports that have mold in it for Inuit individuals in Canada's Arctic North.
We have spoken to the minister about the capital requirements for airports, airstrips as well. Yeah.
So what's the plan to ensure the airport infrastructure is brought up to acceptable standards then?
As part of our airports and as part of our analysis, we look at what the infrastructure needs are, what our funding capacity is, and we have a prioritization of projects that we would undertake, with safety and security being
an acceptable answer,
foremost.
do you think, to the families that are relying on that airport?
Our foremost priority is safety and security, and we'll make the investments and address those requirements as part of our capital work.
You see, that's the problem, and I hope that you take to deep, serious consideration how important this issue is. And you and your own marks have made comments about how you think that these are unacceptable, but it's about your actions, Deputy Minister, that need to be accommodated in order to actually ensure that your work is urgent enough to the minister's understanding of this, because you said it's not a matter of will, but a matter of capacity. If that's the case, then this would be solved. And so there's obviously a gap here between my understanding and the understanding of those who suffer this system. And I don't believe your answers are sufficient. I don't believe you believe your answers are sufficient. And so I'll ask one last time, what is the plan to ensure that these communities no longer have mold in their airports?
So, sorry, I'm getting the time signal. Yes. Oh, 30 seconds. Okay, good. So I apologize for that. So the plan is, as we identify and prioritize investments that are required, we action those.
Is this a priority then?
I can't speak to that specific airport or the various airstrips that are there, but we do have a plan that is based on...
Why can't you speak specifically to it?
I don't have that information, but I'd be pleased to respond.
Please submit that information. That's all for my question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And we now move to our second round for 5 minutes each, starting with Mr. Zimmer.
Thank you once again, Madam Chair. I'll move right to Mr. Hayes. I'm going to ask you a final question, but I have a preamble again. Page 14, 637. We found significant risk that there will be gaps in Canada's surveillance, patrol, and presence in the Arctic in the coming decade as aging equipment reaches the end of its useful service life before replacement systems become available. And I'll list three of them. There's 5. 1, weaknesses in satellite surveillance capabilities. 2, icebreakers reaching the end of their useful lives. 3, further delays in procuring Arctic and offshore patrol ships, or AOPS. 4, patrol aircraft reaching the end of their useful lives. And 5, inadequate infrastructure for patrol equipment. And this is just the equipment aspects of the shortfalls, right? So I'm going to turn to page 16, which talks about the satellite surveillance and the capabilities. And I'd say it's top of mind for a lot of Canadians that saw a spy balloon float over Yukon and into the U.S. and various other devices that we're not sure where they came from. But with that lack of capacity to even keep track of that kind of stuff in our Arctic airspace. I'll go to page 16, 644. We found that current Canadian satellite-based surveillance capabilities do not meet the needs of national defense. That's now, right? And then we're going into a phase, I'll read further down, 646, where we kind of have it good now. It's going to get worse. So 646, the government acknowledges that it will take another decade for the Canadian Space Agency to launch a successor to the RadarSat Constellation mission and that an interruption of satellite Earth observation services past 2026 is therefore a significant risk. And then on the following page, 647, it talks about these won't become operational till 2035. So we're heading into this era of almost a 10-year gap of surveillance of our own airspace at a time when we're seeing threats like really never before, unprecedented, I'd say. And this is all from a minister that says, hey, everything's great, and a prime minister that actually says that the Arctic is strategically important. Well, prove it then, Mr. Prime Minister. I don't see it. And I think even our northern premiers are voicing their concerns about with Putin and the threats there and other ambitions of other countries around the world. Many countries have Arctic policies now. I'm going to just finish with the conclusion and the question. It's coming. Don't worry. 667 of the conclusion page. We concluded, this is your office, we concluded that the federal organization that we audited, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, the Canadian Coast Guard, Environment and Climate Change Canada, National Defence and Transport Canada, had not taken the action required to build the maritime domain awareness they had collectively needed to respond to safety and security risks associated with increasing vessel traffic in Arctic waters. While these organizations had identified gaps in maritime domain awareness, they had not taken sufficient measures to address them. Lastly, furthermore, the existing satellite service and infrastructure did not provide the capacity and the federal organizations needed to perform surveillance of Arctic waters. That's now. Delays in renewal of satellite ships and aircrafts risk compromising the presence of these organizations in Arctic waters. My question to you, Mr. Hayes, does the lack of equipment and lack of attention by this current government and the lack of action as a result, is our Arctic sovereignty and security compromised?
So I would say in response to your question that the items that we have identified in our report vis-a-vis the equipment that is reaching the end of its useful life, or the information sharing, the ability to track non-emitting vessels, these are issues that the departments have identified years ago. They're long-standing issues. In our recommendation, recommendation at 6.66, we asked that the departments focus on identifying options and take action to acquire equipment in a timely manner and develop
I'm
and
just going to
approve
interrupt you
contingency
just
plans.
quickly. I know time's short, but when we have a response from one of the ministries at the table today saying pursuing options, that doesn't get equipment built. That doesn't actually get the job done. So I'll let you finish.
Well, our other recommendation also asks for concrete actions to be taken. For us, it's important that there's a complete picture in the Arctic, and the areas that we've identified as equipment that's ending their useful life without replacements coming, that creates a big concern. Contingency plans can be developed, but there's action that needs to be taken in addition to planning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we now move to Mr. Fragiskatos for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to witnesses for appearing today. Mr. Hayes, one of the findings, if not the key finding of the audit, and I quote here directly, is that there have been long-standing gaps in the surveillance of Arctic waters. How far back would you say that goes?
At least 10 years. We identified that there were long-standing known issues. There might have been gaps before that, but the known issues are at least 10 years old.
Okay, so this is something that governments share responsibility for, not one single government. Would you say that's a fair statement?
I can't comment on what governments were involved, but we did identify that the working group, for example, had identified long-standing issues, what we're calling long-standing issues now, because they have a long period of time that they've been known.
And you said 10 years, so maybe that answers the question. In any case, I did want to ask, if I could, to Transport Canada, more information on drones. The use of drones, obviously, is in terms of how security evolves and what states are doing to take advantage of technological change to ensure their security. Talk to me about drones, as it relates to the Arctic, obviously.
So as mentioned before, our remotely piloted aircraft enhances our ability to do Arctic surveillance. They're equipped with all of the information, the cameras and monitoring technology that currently exist on Dash 7s, but what they also allow us to do is live data streaming and better mapping capability than otherwise. With respect to the security of drones, this has been something that's been a focus of the department for a number of years through our regulatory initiatives. Transport Canada and Canada has been a leader in terms of the regulation and safety and security of drone technology to ensure that they are free from nefarious uses and interception, and so the technology and how they're used is regulated and governed by what we do at Transport Canada.
Thank you very much. The audit also talks about partnership. It mentions specifically the work that is being carried out with local communities and Indigenous communities. Could you shed light for committee members on the nature of that work, how exactly what it involves, what engagement looks like?
Yeah, so there's two components of that, and they're a result of the Oceans Protection Program. And the first is what's called Enhanced Maritime Situational Awareness. It's an initiative that was co-developed with Indigenous partners and is improving our overall domain awareness for coastal communities and Indigenous communities, and it involves real-time live vessel traffic information and other environmental data to look at what the maritime environment is doing. And various partners are using this to look at traffic patterns, tracking icebreakers, to record various observations during the open water season, and monitoring fuel for example. There's also the Proactive Vessel Management Initiative, where we have partnered with Arctic communities to address marine shipping concerns through their waterways in Inuvik and Cambridge Bay. And what we're working with these communities here is on cruise ship management, safety on the ice, vessel speed limits, and mapping safe harbors and places of refuge in the event that they're required. And with both, we rely heavily on local knowledge and the expertise of those who live, work, and hunt in the region.
I have limited time, but I do want to delve in a little more on that particular issue because I think it's so important and perhaps an underemphasized aspect of this entire issue. Whether it's Transport Canada or Department of National Defence working in partnership, has there been efforts to look at what other democracies that have an interest in the Arctic are doing to engage local communities in their respective countries as an attempt to learn what we can do better?
So, as I indicated earlier, we have a number of international collaborations, and we are exchanging best practices. I would say that Canada actually is a leader in how it engages, and in particular the ESMA that you just referenced. The development and the implementation of this project has actually been very much led by our Indigenous partners. They have weekly meetings on the platform, and we're getting real-time input on how to improve the platform, and then we're turning around and tasking those out to our supplier to make the improvements. And our partners in the north are able to plan around the knowledge that they have. So whether it's hunting season or just trips out on the water, they're able to use the data that's being assembled on that platform to make those kinds of decisions. So yes, we are partnering internationally and learning from others and their best practices.
Thank you very much. And we now move on to Ms. Vignola for 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to make a quick comment first. You have all spoken about the gaps and the necessity to identify those gaps and better understand hydrographic structures as well as perhaps geomorphology. I didn't necessarily hear you say that, but I expect that you think that. Now, there's many reports on gaps. So my question is this. what will you do to actually identify specifically what is needed and then do something? There is hydromorphology, and we have two partners. Environment Canada has done an incredible amount of research in this area, and there are universities, including in Quebec, that specialize in this or that have expertise in this. So I'd like to know, to Mr. Thangaraj, do you intend on using all these resources to understand the characteristics of the Arctic and better understand the specific gaps?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we recognize part of this as a result of the audit, but also our own work and consultations in this area is that enhanced data and information from our partners at Environment Canada and other agencies will do nothing but enhance our ability to look at maritime situational awareness and analyze where those risks are, whether they be environmental or security. And so as part of the review of governance, of the maritime situational awareness, but also with marine security as well, we are looking at how do we better incorporate those and use those in real time as we make these decisions. I think EMSA is part of that, where we are looking at information that our Indigenous peoples have, but there are other information sources that we can also leverage.
Thank you. Perhaps if there had been more consultation with these sources of research, it would be easier to get our heads above water. But anyway, I'm going to go to Mr. Waddell.
Desjardins for 2.5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And just to continue in some ways in regards to the last line of questioning to the member from Transport, it's concerning to me to think about how transport, in particular the work of transport in the north, could affect the environment. It's no secret that climate change has had disproportionate effects on the Arctic North. I do want to also make one particular mention, just as a friendly reminder and courtesy to the member representative from Transport, that there's actually a present issue in the House as well, the use of the words "our Indigenous," just to flag the use of using the word "our" as a possessive term for Indigenous folks to avoid the use of that language. And I'll mention that once as a courtesy, but in the future moments, Madam Chair, I'll be raising this as a point of order. To continue, the working groups, to prepare the work that the government is doing to prepare for environmental impacts due to the increase of shipping does possess, I think, a credible threat to Arctic folks, particularly Inuit ways of life. Working groups from the North Atlantic Marine Mammal Commission and Canada's Greenland Joint Commission on the beluga and narwhal met in Denmark in December of just this last year. They recently released a report that predicts there will be almost no narwhal left in the area off the northeastern coast of Bampin Island this summer. Hunters in Pond Inlet, known as the Mitimaluk in Nunuktutuk, are seeing fewer and fewer narwhal in the area where they used to be in abundance, and that their behavior is changing. This is severely affecting Inuit hunters' ability to harvest the narwhals that they use for food, their livelihoods, and of course, culture. The Commission's reports were clear that increased shipping traffic from the nearby Mary River iron ore mine run by Bampin Land is to blame for the disappearance of the narwhal. My question is to the Environment Canada representative: do you accept the findings of that report?
Thank you for that question. I would say I haven't seen that report myself, so I can't accept or reject it. I assume it was based on evidence. Species at risk, marine species at risk would fall under the purview of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. We do have a role, obviously, at Environment and Climate Change Canada in monitoring environmental sensitivities in the Arctic, and happy to provide more detail on that in further questioning if that's helpful.
Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
And we now move to Mr. Cram for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. I believe my questions will, will mostly be for national defense, but if they're for anyone else who wants to chime in, certainly feel free. So, last June, like many Canadians, I watched with interest when I discovered on the news that we're going to have a new land border with Denmark, or at least we will once the treaty with the Danes is signed and implemented regarding Hans Island. So I was wondering if National Defence could share with the committee what activities have happened regarding Hans Island since last June. Are we coordinating or cooperating with the Danes to figure out a plan to monitor the Arctic waters around Hans Island?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I will turn to my colleague if he has anything to add in a second. I'm looking at his face and I'm thinking not, so I will take this one. And we're happy to get back with additional information, but generally speaking, Canadian Armed Forces has regular exercises in the area, including Op Limpet and Op Nanook, and it's generally about overall awareness, both from a marine but also aerial perspective. I am not aware of any specific activities with Denmark related to Hans Island, but we do collaborate very regularly with all our allies from a military perspective. But my assumption is nothing specific related to this, but I will confirm that in writing if that's okay, Madam Chair.
So no activities that you're aware of in that National Defence hasn't done anything differently since last June? Is that correct?
Exercises and operations in the area, I'm not aware of anything specific, but as I said, Madam Chair, I'm happy to take that back and see if there is something specific.
I recall seeing in the news for years that I believe Canada would leave bottles of whiskey on Hans Island, and then the Danes would leave bottles of schnapps. Are we still doing that, or has that been discontinued?
As I said, Madam Chair, the collaboration with Denmark has always been excellent. Great partner, great relationship. But in terms of anything new and different since last June, I will have to get back to the committee.
Okay. In terms of implementing the agreement that was signed with Denmark last June, is it a complicated agreement to implement? Is it a simple agreement to implement? What do you see from National Defence's perspective?
From a national defense perspective, Madam Chair, I don't see any big obstacles, but I also would suggest that maybe this is a question might be better placed to Global Affairs to see if they have anything to say. But from a defense perspective, I don't see anything complicated.
Okay, fair enough. Let's shift gears a little bit. On page 17 of the Auditor General's report, it has a whole, basically a shopping list of expenditures for our Arctic waters. Will these expenditures count towards Canada's obligation to NATO to spend 2% of our GDP on defense spending? To national defense.
I'll speak to national defense. Any investment national defense makes counts towards the calculation of 2%. And so anything in here that will flow through national defense will absolutely count. I won't speak for some other projects in here that are for Coast Guard and others.
Madam Chair, how am I doing for time?
You have 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds.
1 minute, 30 seconds. Okay, thank you. So I guess my final question will be regarding the Nanisivik Naval Facility. Will expenditures towards that facility also count towards our NATO obligations to spend 2% on GDP?
Question, Madam Chair. Again, anything that flows through national defense, and this project, certainly large components do flow through national defense, will count towards the 2% calculation.
And Madam Chair, I believe that's basically my time. So
We still have 40 seconds left.
40 seconds left. Okay, so then I'll continue with the naval facility. So the report stated that the naval facility will be in operation for only 4 weeks for the year once it's finally up and running in 2025. So what will the naval facility be used for the other 48 weeks a year?
Madam Chair, to the defense perspective, unless you were directing to the Auditor General.
No, still.
Short answer, please.
Very short. So it will be a refueling station while it's open that is open to others as well, and that is its purpose. Rob may add in if there's anything beyond the actual refueling, and we can get into this later because we are short for time. But there are contingency plans in terms of how one refuels ships when that station is not open. Rob, anything to add?
I would just say, Madam Chair, that when the facility is a deep water port, and so when it's iced in, it's not used. It is a port. Yeah.
Thank you. And we turn to Ms. Shanahan for 5 minutes.
Chair, and my questions as well will be addressed to national defense. We've heard from colleagues here today concerning Russia and the Danes. I'm concerned as well about intrusions on our jurisdiction. We all saw the reports regarding the balloons and the surveillance buoys that were found in Canadian and U.S. Jurisdiction. What are we doing to protect our air, maritime, and territorial spaces from unlawful surveillance and intrusion?
Maybe I can start, Madam Chair, and see if my colleagues wish to add anything. It is a group team sport in this area in that it is about all domain awareness. You need to keep your eye on air, sea, as well as land. As we look to fill in the gaps that the Auditor General has identified in terms of awareness, you have to think across multiple departments. So Transport Canada has already spoken to what they do. We do have ship patrols in the area when the season is appropriate. We also have our own air, but also existing North Warning System and its upgrade, as well as the eventual replacement for NORAD modernization. So that is all about the complete picture. What I would flag, Madam Chair, that is interest to me is where the ships are of large size and are complying with law and are self-identifying. That's not a gap. You have smaller ships that are not required to use the identification system, and it's with our partner departments that we piece together that information to try and build the complete picture. So we've mentioned numerous tools, and I didn't mention satellites as well, which have already been flagged in terms of a tool. So it's that complete set. The Auditor General has flagged some gaps. We are discussing our plans to fill in those gaps as a group, but that's really the core of it. I'm just looking to my colleagues to see if they wish to add anything. Oh, we have one.
Madam Chair, I would also offer that the advent of the Arctic and offshore patrol ships from a naval perspective are greatly increasing our ability to operate for several months of the year, and that certainly contributes to our better understanding of the domain that we're operating in.
I would like to hear further on the allegations, and I think that they have been demonstrated to be true, that it was Chinese surveillance buoys that were discovered. Could you please talk to us specifically about that threat?
Maybe I will speak to that. Madam Chair, what you have seen reported in the media, there's not really much beyond that I can add at this table.
I'd also like to know from the Department of Defense how we work with U.S. counterparts in this joint surveillance, and notably the Five Eyes, but specifically the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will start, but I expect my colleague from the Royal Canadian Navy will add in. Yeah, Five Eyes critical in terms of sharing information. Obviously, in the North, a special relationship with the U.S. because of NORAD. And so if you are thinking about events in recent weeks related to high-altitude objects, I can say the collaboration and information sharing with the United States was exceptional. And, you know, it is worth restating that NORAD is a binational command where there is both Canadian and American participation, and it was that relationship that was critical in terms of sharing information to deal with that situation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would supplement the comments from the Deputy Minister that the United States and Canada have a long-standing relationship, and that extends, of course, to the maritime environment, in particular between our navies. And in fact, within our regional joint operations centers are intelligence enablers, and those intelligence enablers allow us to share collaboratively information of classified levels in and amongst ourselves so that we can contribute to the domain awareness and use those as cueing events to actually do other intercepts or other responses to threats as they manifest themselves. And so there is a long-standing, very solid relationship with our American partners to share that information from an intelligence perspective, which underpins the domain awareness that we seek to achieve.
Mr. Matthews from the Deputy Minister about investments that have been made to support that collaboration with the United States, specifically in our capabilities. Is it sufficient for this relationship to continue to be beneficial?
Very short answer, please.
All right, I'll highlight a couple of quick ones, Madam Chair. Number one, the recent contract about a year ago to maintain the North Warning System. That's important. While we do plan and develop polar over-the-horizon radar and over-the-horizon radar projects that are part of NORAD modernization. We've already talked about the Arctic offshore patrol ships. The other one I will flag as a coming attraction is infrastructure related to the F-35 purchase, and that will be a coming attraction as well.
Thank you. We now move to our third round, starting off with Mr. Bazan for 5 minutes.
Just for being here. It's some of us, it's getting to be old habit to see you guys. My first question to the Office of the Auditor General. When you guys were doing this review of Arctic surveillance and Arctic security and maritime awareness, were you aware at that time of the report that just came out last week of the Chinese buoys that were found doing surveillance in the Arctic?
No, we were not aware of that report.
Okay, so then my question to National Defense is, was that information shared with the Office of the Auditor General when those buoys were discovered?
As I've said, Madam Chair, not to my knowledge, number one, and I can't really talk at this table beyond anything that you've seen in the media reporting on that event.
Could you, Mr. Matthews, at least tell us when the timeline exactly when those buoys were identified and recovered by National Defense?
I don't think I can drift into that space today, Madam Chair.
But my understanding is that the Office of our General has the security clearances, that information is shareable with the office, is it not?
I can answer that question. We have a broad range of access rights, and we would have access to that information, but we would be similarly limited in the information we could share at this table.
So when the OAG was doing their report, which came out in fall of 2022, if those buoys were discovered during the time that you were doing your investigation, would that have fallen in under your purview at that time, or had you already done your look at all the data that was provided by National Defense at that time and already moved on to drafting your report?
Our conclusions were based on events up until March 31st, 2022. So if that information had been available, we would have had the access to that.
Observations then based upon the recovery of those buoys, as well as the balloon incidences that we've had that violated Canadian airspace, including in the Arctic, as the one that was shot down in Yukon. Does that speak again to the shortfalls that you've identified in our Arctic surveillance systems?
While I can't speak directly to those events, I can say that one of the main points of our report was that the gaps that have been identified and that are long-standing known gaps should be addressed immediately. The Arctic is becoming more and more navigable and accessible, so we would expect concrete actions to be taken at this point.
I know when the OAG appeared at the National Defense Committee that we'd asked questions about some of the violations, which included pleasure vessels that had violated Canadian Arctic waters without proper identification and transponders or reporting in. When the OAG did their evaluation of maritime awareness, did you take into hard consideration the new changes that have been made to NORAD and the joint responsibility between Canada and the U.S. and how we're feeding that information into the NORAD matrix?
In doing our report, we didn't look at international aspects, cooperation. We focused in on Canada's ability to monitor the North.
And my question to National Defense is, in the NORAD modernization as we're moving forward, how much, for those of us that have been to Colorado Springs and have seen how U.S. Coast Guard, for example, is integrated into NORAD's day-to-day operations, is the Royal Canadian Navy taking more of a role in making sure that we're part of that reporting and evaluation process that takes place at NORAD?
Thank you for that question, Madam Chair. I would say the information flow from all lines of service up to NORAD is excellent. What I think we will see in the future as some of these assets come online with additional radars is it'll be more information that is flowing. But I would say through the MSOC that Navy is well plugged in, and any intel that is interesting and relevant gets flowed up through NORAD and through allies as well.
20 seconds. Last question to the Officer General. You have definitely laid out the problems that are associated with satellite surveillance, including the replacement of the radar sat constellation. How quick should we be moving as parliamentarians and pushing the government to replace our existing radar sat constellation?
Thank you. Our recommendation at paragraph 66 identified the fact that there could be contingency plans, but concrete actions need to be taken now.
Thank you. We now have Mr. Dong for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My question is to Fisheries and Oceans Canada, but not limited to them. There's one particular aspect of the report that caught my attention is the illegal fishing. The presence of fishing vessels is said, and their share of overall traffic has increased significantly in the Arctic. Illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing in the Arctic has been a rising problem or concern, rather, especially because its potential effects on fragile marine ecosystem and economy and the risk of increasing tensions among fishing nations. Can the department tell us a bit more about that? Like who's doing the illegal fishings or how severe it is? Because to me, that is an act of encroachment onto our territory, and it's not often, you don't see that a lot on the news, but it is a very serious problem. If illegal fishing or illegal fishery is happening, it could lead to a lot of other illegal things that might be more problematic. And second point is the fragile ecosystem up north, and given now the effects of climate change making the surrounding water more accessible, I just want to get a better understanding of how severe the problem is. To the Department of Fisheries and Oceans.
They're not here. There's nobody from Fisheries and Oceans here today.
Can the Auditor General's office give us some of their findings?
I will ask my colleague, Mr. Swales, to provide a brief answer to that.
I think what I would simply say is that the issue of fishing was one of the ones we identified as the risks that are accompanying the greater access to the Arctic, and therefore one of the issues that the closing of the gaps that we've identified would be intended to address, which would simply reinforce the comments of Mr. Hayes that action is needed now.
If I can just add just on that, and this is definitely a question more addressed to Fisheries and Oceans, but The platform that I referenced earlier in the engagement with Indigenous people in the North, they are able to actually report out when they're seeing illegal activity or what they think might be illegal activity. That gets reported in to well, depending on the activity, it could be reported into transport or to DFO or Coast Guard or others, and then that gets fed into our marine domain awareness, and then the appropriate actions are taken from that point. So it all does come back to marine domain awareness and using all of the tools that we have at our disposal to get a better handle on that. And it is a combination of things. It's this platform, it's air surveillance, it's water surveillance, and a number of other things.
Well, that's a very good answer. Just a follow up on that. So do we have any data or record on how many violations there is from whether illegal fishing is from domestic or foreign fishing boats? And if that's the case, what country are the most often being reported? Do we have any data on these?
So I think that one would definitely need to be directed to Fisheries and Oceans.
Okay. Have you received any reports on the severe or if there's a severe impact due to these illegal fisheries? I can't hear you, sorry.
Okay. I would direct that one to Fisheries and Oceans as well.
Thank you. That's very good. In terms of climate change, I understand that due to climate change, the area of the Arctic gets more accessible. How do we square with the increased opportunities of economic development, mining, and the competitions between the nations in terms of accessing this area and potentially dealing with Canada? How do we square that off with the increased risk of the environmental risk we're going to be facing?
We'll have to save that answer for another time. Moving on to Madame Vignola for 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I'd like to come back to Mr. Waddell. Mr. Waddell, I'm trying to understand your earlier reply about submarines and their use in the Arctic. Am I to understand that our submarines are so obsolete that it could be actually impossible to use them on such a vast and important area like in the Arctic waters? Is that what I should take from what you said?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I'm going to respond in English, if I may.
Say that the platforms are of such obsolescence that they cannot operate in and near the Arctic. As a matter of fact, they have undergone significant operational improvements to ensure that they are a relevant platform. The challenge is in the operating system or the propulsion system of the platform. And with that type of propulsion system, a diesel-electric submarine, and the kind of environment that the Arctic represents, it's just challenging, if not nearly impossible, for that type of propulsion technology to be able to operate in and around sea ice.
Thank you. Now, in terms of Dash 7s and Dash 8s and their use for aerial surveillance in the Arctic, we have one of the longest coastlines in the world, if you actually include all the islands, etc. So am I to understand that we have two aircraft, that one is so old that we can't even find parts? And can one expect that their use would be efficient? And if we wanted to have any kind of efficient use, how many would we need? And with respect to the Lockheed Martin and Boeing aircraft, I realize they're not ready, but will they have the capacity to operate in the Arctic, again, for surveillance purposes? So, Mr. Thangaraj, first, please.
Dash 7, they are, as you said, aging aircraft, and that's why we've procured a very robust spare parts inventory to ensure that we can keep them operational for as long as possible. The surveillance program is augmented by the Dash 8, which flies out of Vancouver for the Western Arctic, but there are other Dash 8s that are positioned in Ottawa and Moncton that can be mobilized if required to ensure that we have adequate coverage for surveillance. In the longer term, we are working with Coast Guard on a plan to replace and what the right aircraft and right capital asset is to replace that. In the meantime, the use of the remotely piloted aircraft is one way of, again, augmenting the air capacity that we have. But the longer-term solution will be a result of the study that we're doing with Coast Guard.
Thank you very much. Mr. Desjardins for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to continue in regards to the work that's taking place to regulate shipping within Canada's Arctic. So I'd like to maybe ask the representative from Transport what the plan is to ensure that shipping in the Arctic is properly regulated so that we avoid devastating impacts on marine ecosystems and the Inuit communities that depend on them. What's the plan to regulate those?
So we have advanced some regulations through a bill that's in the House now, Bill C-33. But that is making its way through. And part of that will allow for greater authorities for us to direct certain actions if there are events that are taking place. It's also to allow for better information sharing and requiring operators to do certain things depending on what the science is telling us and what the implications are for the North and the Arctic. So we are.
Would Banthamland be exempt from those new regulations? Have they received any waivers of that kind? Or will they receive anything like that?
I couldn't comment on that. I'd have to get back to you on that.
Are they following all existing applicable maritime regulations?
I'd have to get back to you on the specifics of that.
So not sure if Banthamland is following all applicable maritime regulations. Just to be clear, it's quite important.
It's an important question, and I don't want to answer on a matter that I don't have full information on.
Would the Deputy Minister have any information?
Oh, I have nothing further. So we would have to respond to you in writing on that through the chair.
Sure. Well, I'll also request that we respond to that question in writing in regards to Banthamland. Thank you. And Madam Chair, how much time?
20 seconds left.
Sure. Will there be another round?
There should be time for another round, yes.
Okay, sure. I'll just save my last question for the following round. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Macaulay for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Mr. Matthews, I wonder if you could just clear up something for us. In our first meeting on this issue, I was asking about the cost for fixing the AOPS with their diesel engine issues. PSPC stated, well, it's being negotiated who would cover the costs. But Jessica Lamorandi from your office stated that the taxpayers, or D&D, is fully responsible for the costs. So which is it?
Madam Chair, it's a bit of both. So the warranty...
It can't be both. Who's paying for it?
No, I think in this case it is, Madam Chair. The warranty on the AOPS is 1 year after into service. You have 2 vessels that have exceeded that 1 year point, so reading the warranty purely, that would be on National Defence to pay. The ship that may have had those, the same design but is not yet into service, it is on the shipyard to make sure that is addressed before it changes hands.
But the cost of the DeWolf, taxpayers are getting that.
Yes, but I'm reading the warranty purely. It's 1 year, so that would put it in our hands. I will say that there's a technical investigation into the cause, and I'm expecting it will be causes. Obviously, we'll take a good read of that and see where it lands. But if your question is, what does the warranty say? 1 year.
No, the question wasn't what the warranty. It's who's paying for it. Your department said taxpayers. PSPC said it's being negotiated. So
if you read the warranty to the letter, it's in our hands, but I want to take a look at the technical report and maybe...
Do you know why PSPC say they're investigating it when you just stated it's in your hands? And the question was very clear to them about the cost to fix the DeWolf, which was after warranty.
I'd be speculating here, Madam Chair, because I don't, I wasn't here, but I would say that given we were awaiting a technical report, I would be open to looking at that and re-engaging with the company based on what it says.
A further statement that it might be linked to the engine cooling. So subsequent AOPS, are there costs that we're looking at that are post-warranty for other ships? Or added costs to the taxpayers to address this before others are rolled out?
I get the sense my coworker here wants to chime in, and she's an expert, but I will say the ships that are not yet, in the water and accepted, whatever the investigation realizes, they will be addressed. But Nancy, to add
just very quickly, Ms. Tremblay, because I'm short on time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the question. So when PSPC was here last, the technical investigation on the technical issues had not been completed. It has since then. So we're going through the recommendations of that report and determining between PSPC and the builder where the costs will lie.
To our associate police from the Navy, do we know how the Chinese, the PRC, delivered those spying buoys in our territory? Was that made public?
I wouldn't be in a position to comment on that one. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Do you think, in light of what their government has been doing with the spy balloons, these buoys, that perhaps we should be looking to have them removed as an observer status from the Arctic Council?
I think that response to that question is a little out of my jurisdiction, Madam Chair.
I suspected as much, but I'd just like to ask. Mr. Matthews, I just want to get back to you. On the C-295, the Kingfisher debacle, for lack of better words, I'm wondering, have we looked at what are the unintended consequences of this on this CR-130 fleet to cover the search and rescue shortfalls due to the problems and the delays with the 295s, and what it's going to affect the future life cycle of the C-130s?
The short answer is yes, we've looked into risk mitigation, which is what this is, to fill in a gap, and that was factored into making that decision. Can I give you any specific information in terms of additional hours of flying, et cetera, and what it might do? I cannot.
The 130s have a set lifetime. They're very expensive to maintain and run instead of, being 4 engines as opposed to what the Kingfishers were supposed to be. Like, what are the added costs? Are we burning out the 130s 1 or 2, 3 years early on their ballpark 60,000 hour lifespan?
I understand the question. I don't have information at that detailed level here. I can absolutely take that one back unless, Nancy, you have an answer, but I suspect not.
Oh, certainly if you can get back to this, that'd be wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Oh.
And now we move on
I didn't even have to cut you off, Ms. Tremblay.
We move on to Ms. Bradford for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to look now at the environmental aspect of the Arctic, and so I'll be directing these to ECCC. What are some of the ECC's activities in North and Arctic in terms of weather and environmental prediction?
Thank you very much for the question, and I have a colleague here from the Meteorological Service who can certainly fill in any blanks, but I would say the key parts that we are providing are near-term predictions around, obviously, weather, ice, water conditions, wind, and things like that we would share with colleagues and obviously with communities. And then longer-term meteorological kind of climate conditions that obviously can be used for planning and other activities to sort of get at longer-term trends. But I'd be happy to ask my colleague Ken to add in some color commentary.
The only thing I could add to that is, in addition to providing meteorological information, intelligence, ice information for Canadian territory, we provided for a broad swath of the Arctic in international waters as part of international agreements under the International Maritime Organization.
And can satellite data be used to fill weather and climate observation gaps in the north?
Definitely, satellite has become, the primary tool for meteorological surveillance and ice surveillance, where we previously relied on the transport dash aircraft, for example, for ice. We now rely almost exclusively on satellite surveillance.
And in general, what do we know about the status of water quality in the northern areas of Canada?
I think in general what we know is that the water quality levels are good. I would say the lower levels of economic activity obviously in the north, in the Arctic, would contribute to that, but we have good quality water indicators for northern waters.
So given the increased traffic in the north, what's ECC's role should there be an environmental emergency?
So we are certainly, the Meteorological Service is there to provide whatever support in terms of predictions, in terms of any climactic or other climactic weather contributions or effects in terms of emergency. We have obviously conservation officers and others who would be involved depending on where the activity takes place, and we have a coordinating role, I would say, in terms of any emergency response, depending on where exactly it takes place.
So how would you respond if there was an environmental emergency up there? What if there was some sort of a spill or something as a result of this increased marine traffic?
Well, a spill, we have, certainly from the Meteorological Service, we have some predictive or analytical, and Ken can talk more about it, from the Ice Service that allows us to detect and track spills or disturbances, I think, that would give us early warning. If it happens over water, I think that's the Coast Guard that would take primary responsibility in terms of first response. But anyway, I can answer more if you like, but that's the simple response.
So now flipping over to the Department of Transport again, what's the status of the integration of a third national shipbuilding strategy shipyard to support the Canadian Coast Guard program?
That, Madam Chair, that's actually a question for PSPC, but we touched on it earlier in that the negotiations are ongoing with the third shipyard, but it's led by the Department of PSPC.
Time frame for that at the moment?
Not that I'm aware of, but I wouldn't necessarily be the best person to ask.
Okay, so now, given that many of the delays in procuring ocean vessels have already been identified in the audit of the National Shipbuilding Strategy, what other insights can be provided regarding further reasons for the delays? I'm not sure who wants to take that one.
Maybe I can start, Madam Chair, from a defense perspective. We are still dealing with a shipbuilding industry in Canada that is relatively new in building these size of ships. And as you build new and different ships, they, first in class, second in class, generally come with problems when you look worldwide. And we've touched on some of the recent challenges with the Arctic Offshore Patrol Ship. Really, what you want to get to, Madam Chair, is a series where you're building similar ships in a long run. And by the time you hit the fourth ship, or third ship, you can factor in anything you've learned into your early ships. So just by way of example, under Arctic Offshore Patrol ship, then the sixth ship is likely going to come in, at a significantly less cost than the first ship because of learnings in the manufacturing process, and they will have learned a few things in the design process as well.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
And we now move to our fourth round, and starting with Mr. Cram for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And first off, for Mr. Matthews, in response to my colleague, Mr. McCauley's question, if you could provide information about the C-130H in particular, that would be very much appreciated. Okay, so changing gears now. Mr. Matthews, are Russian submarines operating in Canada's Arctic waters?
We are aware that Russia has excellent submarine capability. I can't speak to exactly where they're operating. Nothing to add. If there's nothing, that's okay, Steve. Nothing to add. So.
Nothing to add because you don't know, or because that information is classified?
I am not aware of any activity being in Canadian waters, but.
So the report outlined that Canada has considerable difficulty detecting surface vessels operating in our Arctic waters. If Russia or any other foreign country were operating submarines, how would we ever know?
So I think, Madam Chair, the Auditor General's report points to awareness gaps, and we've talked about air, sea. We've just now subsurface, land, and it is all of these things coming together that actually get you to all domain awareness, and that is where the Armed Forces is looking to go in terms of the investments and upgrades it intends to make. A big part of the story is NORAD modernization, which we've already spoken about, but subsurface is a key one going forward, absolutely.
So last fall, the Chief of the Defense Staff, General Wayne Eyre, appeared before the Defense Committee, and he had a quote I would like to read for you now. He said, "Our hold on our Arctic would be much more secure with greater subsurface domain awareness at sea," unquote. So how can we improve our subsurface domain awareness? So should we have more listening devices on our icebreakers? Should we have more devices stationed permanently under the sea? What should we be doing?
Thank you. And Madam Chair, that relates to the comment I just made earlier as well in terms of, one of the next great areas we have to focus on. I would flag innovation as probably the key answer. And I would also highlight that, the Defense Research, DRDC, does some excellent research in subsurface, and that is something that I think is going to become more and more important as the years go on, and the capability that goes with that monitoring will likely be multifaceted. Sorry, Navy wants to jump in.
Madam Chair, I would just offer a couple of additional supplemental points. Based a lot on the efforts of DRDC and others and some of the innovation pieces that we've been talking about, the Royal Canadian Navy is involved extensively in looking at autonomous vehicles and other remotely operated vehicles, both aerial and subsurface, along with other sensors to support and enhance our ability to understand the subsurface domain, including in the Arctic region.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to circle back to the issue of the Chinese buoys that were discovered recently. What was the purpose of these buoys in our waters in the first place? What were they hoping to accomplish?
I can't offer any additional information at this stage beyond what has already been publicly reported, so I regret I cannot answer that question.
Okay, so it was publicly reported that the purpose of the buoys may be to monitor American submarines in Canada's Arctic waters. Can you confirm if that could have been a possibility?
Madam Chair, there's a lot of speculation about what could have been the purpose, but at this stage I can't offer any fact-based information.
Okay. How about this? Who has a greater ability to monitor subsurface activity in Canada's Arctic waters, Canada or China?
I don't have information on that one either, Madam Chair, but I would stress this is the emerging area when we talk about all domain awareness. It is where innovation and activity is going to be absolutely critical going forward.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, how am I doing for time?
Have 40 seconds left.
40 seconds left.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry, 20 seconds left.
20 seconds left. Okay. Well,
Madam, this may actually be helpful to the member, Madam Chair. I'm turning to my colleague Andrew, but I believe the Auditor General's report did not look at subsurface. Do I have that correct?
That's correct.
That is correct. Okay.
okay. And I suspect I'm right about out of time right now, Madam Chair, and so I'll thank you for that.
Thank you very much. And now we move on to Mr. Fragiskatis for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to return back to this point, Deputy Minister, that you just put on the table, the point about innovation and how this figures, I think, quite prominently now and into the future with respect to the question of the Arctic. Could you expand on that? Is there anything else that you'd like to elaborate on?
A couple of things worth stressing, and my colleagues may have additional points as well. As subsurface, we flagged DRDC, which is our defense research organization, does excellent work in numerous areas, but of relevance here today would be the work they do in subsurface that is mostly based out of their Nova Scotia facility. I would flag that allies are also doing similar research, and so that collaboration is really important. Satellites have been mentioned here today as an area of importance, but also where there are gaps and some mitigation required. I think you can look to innovation in terms of the quality of satellite imagery going forward. Some of the things we are looking to do to temporarily fill that gap, should it come to fruition, is dealing with private sector partners and allies. And so, again, that outreach is critical. I'll pause there and see if my colleague Steve or Rob wish to add anything. Not a must, though. Rob, nothing. Steve?
I would just offer that, although not in the scope of the Auditor General's report, the international partnerships in terms of information sharing, the collaboration that we, in particular Canada, along with a number of other partners, and in terms of continental defense, our work with the United States really reinforces the information sharing that allows us to get after responding to the variety of threats that we're talking about.
In fact, if you could, whoever, Deputy Minister, if you wanted to take it, or Mr. Weddell, if you wanted to take it. Obviously, this is a shared security concern among a number of democracies. So the collaboration that you point to, what does that amount to? Is it a regular engagement? Is it engagement on particular issues, or is it something that's incidental and coming up only every now and then? Let's say.
Colleague Rear Admiral Waddell may wish to add. There's interaction at numerous levels, regular through just relationships, sharing of information that comes to our attention or their attention that is relevant. But we also talk a lot about innovation, and we want to make sure that we're collaborating and not duplicating. So you will see collaboration amongst the researchers, but also collaboration amongst air forces, navies, et cetera, to advance the cause there. Admiral Waddell.
Madam Chair, I would just additionally offer that that our collaboration with allies, and particularly in terms of continental defense, it can be certainly periodic staff talks. We could have exchange officers embedded in each other's organizations. It's routine exercises at sea where we exercise security and sovereignty patrols. So there are a number of features that allow us to persistently make sure that we're sharing best practices and information sharing.
Excuse me, 2 minutes that I have, if I could go back to Transport Canada. Could you elaborate on the number of partnerships that exist with local communities, in particular Indigenous communities, on the question of surveillance? Specific number, if you have it.
Yeah, I think the specific number is 17 communities. So there's that, and we're continuously trying to build the awareness. So I'm not going to say every month that goes by we have a new partner, but as people become aware of the engagement in the platform and what it offers, we are getting more who want to be part of this platform and this partnership. And it does take a little bit of training, but. And I just happened to see a video recently of one of the key people that we're working with who is located in the north and actually is an advocate in helping us to spread the word. So we're doing everything that we can to make people aware of it and bring them in if there's an interest.
I was going to ask in terms of a plan to expand that, but it sounds like you're waiting for it to take a momentum on its own and seeing where that leads. Is that fair to say that there's no actual plan to expand? Let's say you say that there's 17 communities, for example. There's no plan to say in a year we would like to have 25 or 30 or...
So I would have to talk to my team on whether or not we have specific targets. We may. But for us, the target is as many as possible because it's a win-win kind of platform for those living in those communities and for us in terms of information and data sharing.
Thank
you very much. We now turn to Madame Vignola for 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Mr. Matthews, I'd like us to talk about the aircraft that will be procured over the next few years, especially given the announcements of agreements with Boeing and Lockheed Martin. Are there any assurances or guarantees, rather, that this aircraft is able to operate in the north, and have any tests been done?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. With respect to the F-35s, there was a full assessment done in order to select this aircraft. I don't know if the member has concerns about Boeing. I don't know what concerns those would be, but when National Defence purchases aircraft, there is the requirement that the aircraft can function in the Arctic. Thank you. Mr. Forbes, earlier you were asked about what Environment Canada can do in terms of detecting oil spills. Now, let's say there's an environmental disaster and that ice becomes a factor and icebreakers can't make it. What can be done? Thank you for the question. Perhaps I will answer in terms of what we can do within our department, because if something is detected, thanks to our meteorological services, then we will be sharing that information very quickly with our colleagues and counterparts. We will make sure that everybody understands what the current situation is and what's happening, whether that's on ice or in the water. And we will make sure that this information is immediately shared, so that everybody is aware of the environment they're working in. So there could be like an Exxon Valdez situation without icebreakers. Well, that's not what I was saying. What I'm saying is what we can do within our department with respect to Arctic waters. But I see that my colleague wants to add something. Yes, I could add to that. Now, obviously, we try to mobilize as quickly as possible the assets that we have in order to respond. The operators themselves also have requirements in terms of equipment on their vessels in order to be able to respond to situations if we ever find ourselves in a situation. We're also undertaking consultations on this. And we've been asking.
Thank you. Moving on to Mr. Desjardins for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to now turn my final question to Bill Matthews, the Deputy Minister for National Defence, in regards to the Canadian Rangers. And so my colleagues, particularly the Member of Parliament from Nunavut, works largely with members of the Canadian Rangers when dealing with the Canadian Armed Forces. And we've heard a great deal of testimony from Inuit Canadian rangers who don't feel that they have adequate support they need when it comes to getting reimbursement for their equipment when they participate in military exercises. So just for preference for Canadians who may not know, the Canadian Rangers utilize their own equipment, private equipment, and lease, rent, or find other accommodations by way of a reimbursement agreement between the government and those Rangers for the utilization of that equipment. The wear and tear, in addition to whatever use that those equipment undergoes, of course, is something that the individual would have to deal with, especially if there's maintenance required. And so that reimbursement total, of course, would be different or sometimes not satisfactory depending on how or expensive that maintenance could be. And so my question would be, it is incredibly important that the Rangers, one, are well equipped, but also have the tools to ensure that they continue to do the work that they need to do. And so I think it is appropriate that the Rangers have the option to utilize their own equipment, particularly if it is important to them to be able to utilize that equipment for better results. But how is National Defense understanding those reimbursements? What is the way do they get to the reimbursement of the utilization of that equipment? And is there any way to ensure that the regular costs that are going up for these Rangers keep in line with the costs keep in line with the reimbursement that they should be getting?
Thank you to the member
sorry,
for...
I can't hear you, Mr. Matthews. There we go.
Thank you to the member for raising this question. I had not actually heard there were specific issues around the program, so I'm happy to take that back and look into it. I should flag for the committee members, though, 5,200 Rangers. In terms of the rifles they use, they are rifles provided by the Canadian Armed Forces. If there's a desire to question how the program works and maybe suggest something better, I'm open to observations on that front, and I'll take it back.
Sure, thank you very much. And so I think the important piece here is the fact that beyond rifles, of course, I'm talking more specifically about transport vehicles, perhaps like a snowmobile. How does one ensure that the reimbursement amounts keep consistent with the cost of maintenance?
And we'll have to have that answer another time. Thank you.
Or in writing, please.
And in writing.
Yes, please.
Thank you. We now move to Mr. McCauley for 5 minutes.
Oh, thanks, Chair. I wasn't aware we're going to get another round. Mr. Matthews, and I'm sorry, Mr. Caldwell, I'm probably wrecking your name. I'm looking at the Senate report from a couple years back talking about the AOPS, and their comment is it can't operate in ice a meter thick, slower than a BC ferry, can operate only in summer, and need the Coast Guard to escort them in northern waters. Do you think that's an accurate assessment of the AOPS? And if so, should we be continuing building these that might have very, very limited use for taxpayers or for the Navy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will start, but I think the Navy is best placed to speak to capability. They're ice capable. They're not icebreakers. But the Navy is actually quite anxiously looking forward to the receipt of the rest of the AOPS. They find them quite useful in terms of some of the infrastructure they can provide and some of their capability. But Rear Admiral Waddell?
Thank you. That's fine. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would say a couple of points in reply that the Navy is enthusiastically bringing this capability into service. Sailors are excited about the platform. They're excited about the missions that we're setting them on. And we, in fact, have been very pleased with the performance thus far in this new class that we're introducing into service in terms of capabilities in ice and the endurance and range and the persistence that they're able to provide.
I'm sorry for laughing, but all I've read about is them breaking down and problems with water filtration, other issues, but they're pleased with the performance so far. I'm sorry. Let me just ask, the cost issue, Mr. Matthews, again, I'm going to refer back to our last committee meeting on this, and PSPC in their opening statement said costs are dropping for the AOPS. But of course, we saw reported that it's going to be another $780 million added on since the last update. Are the costs dropping for the AOPS contracts, or are they going up?
Nancy may have some information to provide here, but
I realize that we're getting more efficient on building them, et cetera, et cetera. But simple question, are costs going up or costs dropping?
The efficiency in terms of production is basically ahead of schedule in terms of the dividend you would expect for building Ship 5 versus Ship 1. That is indeed happening. Nancy, I'm not sure if you have specifics on cost. But.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I can confirm that the cost of SHIP 4 is expected to be 57% of the cost of SHIP 1.
Stated the cost of the program is going down, but are we cutting, it's a simple question, are we cutting, taxpayers cutting a bigger check or a smaller check for the program? You announced, I think in January, they were up an extra $780 million. Is that a drop? And again, what I'm getting at is I'm just concerned about PSPC comes and testifies in this committee one thing, and the reality seems to be going a different way.
So thank you very much, Madam Chair. If I can add, so 57% expected cost for SHIP 4 compared to SHIP 1. However, I can speak about the fact that there's been increasing cost due to inflation, disruption in supply chain.
I'm aware of all that, and I'm aware that, again, the bill is an extra $780 million. Again, I'm just expressing my concern that PSPC comes before this committee and therefore taxpayers and says costs are declining, but they're clearly not. Transport, I just want to ask you very quickly, from the report 6.59 states that complete an obsolescence study on the aircraft used for Arctic surveillance. No strategy has been put in place to renew the aircraft. Is that correct, what the AG has reported?
So prior to the commencement well, I guess during the audit, we have worked with Coast Guard to look at a strategy to replace the Dash 7s and to find out what that solution is. That strategy should be that work should be reporting out this month, and then we'll have a way forward on what the replacement for the Dash 7 should be. In the interim, as I had noted, we are procuring a large inventory of spare parts to ensure.
No strategy is put in place to renew the aircraft. Is that just because the study was done in 2021? Transport hadn't got around to?
That's correct. We're currently looking at that right now.
Do you accept that, Mr. Hayes?
I accept that they're looking at it right now. Our point was that concrete action needs to be taken to renew equipment that's ending its useful life.
Contract or concrete action then?
Very short answer, please.
We'll get the report this month.
Would you share it with us?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thanks very much. Thanks, Mr. Hayes.
Thank you. And to our last person today, Ms. Shanahan for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I want to thank the witnesses here. We've had, this is the second of 2 hearings that we're having on this OAG report on Arctic waters. Arctic surveillance, and it's been very, very interesting. We certainly learned a lot. My question now is actually going to go to Environment Canada. I'd like to learn more, especially anything that you haven't had the opportunity to bring to the committee here today on your activities in the North and Arctic in terms of weather and environmental prediction.
Well, I think I might turn to Ken to provide a bit more since he's the expert in this area. But as I say, in terms of weather and prediction, we have both short-term work that we do, and Ken can talk a bit more about our presence in terms of how we do that in the North to help both communities and partners, both on land and over the water. And then we do long-term research that can help on a bunch of fronts. But maybe, Ken, I can let you provide a bit more detail.
Well, first of all, on the weather side, we have a full public weather program for communities in the Arctic. All of the communities get public weather forecasts and warnings. For the marine communities, we have a full marine weather program, which includes weather conditions, sea state, and finally, we have an advanced, from a world's perspective, ice monitoring and prediction program. We cooperate extensively internationally on ice, but we are considered a lead nation in understanding sea ice, tracking sea ice, characterizing sea ice, which is critical for the operations of both now the Navy and Coast Guard for their operations. And as I said earlier, we took on a responsibility to provide the same information for all international waters all the way to the pole from north of Alaska, north of Greenland, across the Arctic for the same information to support all international activities.
And I'm wondering about cooperation with the United States again in this area. Can you talk to me about some of the projects that you have with the United States?
There are several. Probably the strongest one, particularly relevant to the Arctic, is on sea ice. We have a trilateral arrangement with our ice service, with the ice service in the United States, which is part of NOAA, and also with the International Ice Patrol, which is part of the U.S. Coast Guard for tracking icebergs. And so we have a trilateral arrangement with the U.S. on all aspects of sea ice. We actually deliver service seamlessly between the organizations. For example, for ice on the Great Lakes, the forecast may come out from Canada one day and from the U.S. the next day for the same forecast. It's totally harmonized between the two countries.
Even as far as Fahrenheit and Celsius? Have you ironed that one out yet?
We haven't worked that one out yet. Scientifically, though, they agree that Celsius is the right scale. But publicly, it's another question.
Interesting. Does it ever come up, though? Are there disagreements? Is there a difference in approach? Especially over, with Alaska being there, of course, there must be, Americans that have a very much of a vested interest as well as how things are done.
Not difference of opinion. I think we learn from each other, particularly because do a lot of work with coastal communities on travel and sea ice, and we're learning from that to broaden our programs for sea ice, because traditionally they've been about vessel traffic and supporting vessel activity, but we've increasingly learned about how we can support community activity, travel on sea ice, hunting on sea ice, where it's a very different environment with land-fast ice versus open water ice. So we're working collaboratively to learn from them.
Very good. And can you share with us, speaking of communities, any projects that you have with the Indigenous communities, with the Inuit in the area?
Ours are particularly through university partnerships and who they have the programs with the communities, and this is on things like ice thickness, measuring ice thickness and techniques for ice thickness. So that's where the strongest one is, sort of indirectly through the universities that we're largely cooperating.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the witnesses for coming yet again. And I'd like to say congratulations to Mr. Thangaraj as your new role of Deputy Minister of Transport. Do I have consent to adjourn the meeting? Very good. Adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.